Yep.
All right, Mike, what's up, man? It's good to finally chat. We're a little bit behind schedule because of my daughter's sleep, so and we
Yeah.
might have to pause because of your daughter's sleep. So
Yeah.
that's the life of a parent.
It's a it's a normal thing.
Of
So
course.
yeah.
Um, well, dude, I'm glad we could do this. It took a little scheduling, but a little continuation or follow up to our last conversation where you were asking me a bunch of questions. We didn't get a chance to get to talking about what you've got going on, and I think what we had talked about talking again even at the end of our conversation, but then I think I saw Karen Wong um, tagging you in. I should not even be mentioning this without being able to pull up the tweets, but tagging you in a couple different things that had to do with building. It might have been frankly one of the Masons. Like there's a guy on Twitter named Orthodox Mason. I can't remember if it was
Oh.
that she was tagging you in, but it made me think, man, I want to talk to Mike about what he's doing with Tectonic School and building and all of that, because I really have never gotten a chance to hear too much of that part of your story, and your thoughts on um, just hands-on work and the trades and how that fits into like your vision for the life of the church, and especially I
Yeah.
think maybe with a particular angle towards how that fits into um, like a proper sort of, I guess you could use the word education, but formation into manhood, I guess specifically, because
Hmm.
I think, not even really much of a story, but just a simple fact about my life is I really, um, and I don't blame my dad for this because I think that he also was not formed in this way, but like there was no passing down of in my life of skills related to hands-on work really of any way, even really being um, handy in like the classic manner of like a dad. My
Yeah.
dad did not pass that down to me. Nobody else in my family did. Those kind of competencies weren't. It was always something you paid for, and I didn't really. I guess I always grew up thinking like, oh well, if you can pay for it, why, that's great, save you time or whatever. And now that I'm an adult and I'm about to raise children, I've learned so much more about formation and education, all these things I see, and the necessity of embodiment. I just see and I've felt and experienced how impoverished I am, because anytime I need to do something at my house or for my wife or whatever, oftentimes I have to look it up on YouTube, which is quite sad. So,
Well,
anyways,
I
that's
mean,
that's
hey,
not
I
really a
still
question, but
there's a lot of stuff I look up on YouTube. I mean, I think you
it
learn the fact that so many people have put their stuff on YouTube is great. But I think,
is. That's a huge, it's a huge benefit that I'm able even
yeah,
to do that, because it's like, otherwise I would be kind of SOL. So maybe there's a question in there, but I'd just be curious to hear, yeah, really any direction you want to take it in terms of what you're doing with Tectonic School, and maybe how you've, maybe your experience or your thoughts on sort of that formative aspect.
yeah. Well, so it was definitely something I got from my dad, and I probably didn't really appreciate it that much at the time. So my dad was a school teacher, and then later on he became a pastor bivocationally, and but with his school job, obviously he gets the summers off. Um, but he would always take like these handyman jobs in the summer
Mm,
vacation. So I didn't really appreciate it because like my brother and me would always get dragged, and sometimes my sister too, to like these people's house, and sometimes it was like our grandmother's house, or but or other people that he knew, and we'd be like painting or sealing driveways, or just doing like lawn care, or
yeah.
fix other random stuff or whatever, all this kind of handyman stuff. And so that was kind of like not the way that I wanted to spend my
Summer
my
break.
summers. Yeah. um but it was good, like, and he did also, it's at certain points, like, take some time to kind of show us like some specific skills, like how to use, how to hammer nails, and how to cut with like a handsaw. And I remember like we made like little tool boxes, like, together. And so my brother and my sister and I all had like our own little toolbox with like smaller kid-ish size tools, and that always like went lost and got missing, and then but then the other thing, like my brother and I would just steal all stuff from like my dad's shop in in the basement, and like to go build forts in the woods and stuff like that, and then he would just get mad at us because we would lose his good tools. But so there was, there was also like, there was a creative aspect to it that was pretty cool. And like, even if it was making stuff for like school projects or things like that, there was like this do it yourself kind of thing. And so that was kind of a fun aspect, especially, I didn't realize at first, a lot of it was like, well, we can't afford to pay whoever. And even to buy some stuff, like would be, not reasonable, but if we could make it, then we could do it. And in some ways that was kind of like, there was some stuff that was cooler, and because it was homemade like that.
Sure.
So those are some skills. And then like when my dad became a pastor, and my brother and I were older, like he would also kind of farm us off to like help the old people in the church with whatever they needed. And so that was, that was clearly like something I just took for granted, of like, oh yeah, this is it's useful to have these skills, and these are some good things you can do with it. So like I kind of had that, the way that kind of like fitted into like a community life or whatever. I had never really thought about doing it as like a job, until much later. So what I actually ended up deciding was that like ministry was my calling or whatever. That was the most important thing. And so, in whatever capacity it was, I wanted to work in the ministry. And I ended up going to like a discipleship program that was at this big mega church that one of my friends had gone to. And it was out in Illinois. I grew up in Massachusetts. So it was a, trek halfway across the country. And that church, the program they had, I think it was too big for what they could really accomplish. Like they had more people that they needed to like keep busy with real stuff. There wasn't enough like leaders to like really think about what to do with all these kids. So it was kind of not the greatest experience. It was kind of good time for like spiritual development. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to a more traditional Bible college for a couple of years too, and then started working for some churches. And it was always good to have those skills, like having those skills. When I started, let's see, this was probably about, it was around when I got married, like 11 years ago. So my wife and I both worked at a church down the street from my dad's church, but it was a much bigger church that had more stuff going on. They had a school, so we had both taught at the school at some point. And then they also had some thrift stores. I started working in one of the thrift stores. I was doing part-time, so like half the day I'd teach, and then in the morning, and then I'd go work in the store. And then eventually they acquired this big building that was, it was like another kind of local gift store that had been in business for a long time. And it was like this really great old property with like a huge barn and like lots of space. And they basically got it for a really good deal because the people that were selling it was like a family business. And they were like, we don't want to see this place like leveled and, put condos in or something. So we got the opportunity to move in there, and then they had like enough space in there to kind of set up like a workshop. And so I was just working there, and then I started, I think, still working there like part-time. And then I would start like fixing stuff. So, we get like furniture that comes in, and I'd fix it up and maybe refinish some of it, or I could reuse it for different things. And the people that ran the place, they had a lot of creative ideas. And basically I was just like, yeah, I can figure out how to do that. Like I learned that to always just say yes to like the opportunity. And then figure out how I was going to do it afterwards.
Oh yeah.
And so like then there was me and one other guy who had also kind of done some of that stuff, and they were like, well, one of you guys, we want to do this like full time, and the other guy's going to work in the store, so we're going to give you like a competition. So the competition was like to build a table, and he didn't really have much like of an idea of what he wanted to do or whatever. So but I was like, this is a, I'm gonna win this. So I was like, spending all my time like looking up stuff on YouTube, some woodworking shows that I'd remembered from a kid when I was a kid that I watched, and like to get all the skills and the design and figure things out. And I made this like really great table. And so I got to do that kind of stuff full time. So that was pretty cool. And then so I started doing that for several years, and got to do a lot of really cool projects and just really work on my skills. And that church environment, the community aspect was a little bit like strained, the relationships there after a while. So eventually, when I moved, when we ended up moving to Texas, my wife and I, with my whole family came down, I decided I didn't want to work for a church again. And I was like, well, I guess I can try to find a job doing these with these skills that I've gained. So I started working for a cabinet company here in town and all the new construction. And I didn't really feel like I was necessarily qualified, like, because I didn't have like a real professional resume, but I
Mm-hmm.
put like a portfolio together and kind of talked to the guy about some of my experience, and he was telling me what the job entailed. And then immediately I was like, oh, yeah, I can take care of all this stuff, like, no problem. And there was some new stuff that was like a little unfamiliar that I had to learn. So that was cool that there was some challenges too, but like, it was pretty clear to see like, oh, there's actually like a value for this skill set, because when I was working for the church, I was getting paid very little
Yeah, I'm sure.
for like, doing a lot of pretty projects that if somebody else was paying for them, they would probably cost a whole lot. But it was like, because it was for the church, they were just paying me a little bit, and we were paying for the
Mm-hmm.
materials, and that was it. So I didn't really have like a understanding of value. And then I was like, well, you really get paid pretty well for doing this stuff. And like here in Texas, where the cost of living is lower, it's like, well, we can actually afford a house, like, from
Mm-hmm.
me doing this. And my wife had started working like part-time at our church eventually. And so it's like, yeah, like this is like pretty good. And then kind of had some like meaning crisis stuff when all that COVID stuff went down, and I was afraid like that the rapture was coming and the end of the world was gonna happen. And I got through that, and then realized at some point, kind of got into this like Paul Vanderklay community,
Mm-hmm.
um, and realized like, like I'm actually like really happy, and like I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Like this work is satisfying. I get a sense of accomplishment from it. I get to listen to stuff that I enjoy that makes me think. So like I'm growing mentally, spiritually, like being enriched in that way, and starting to kind of make a little bit of friendships and communities through that online space too. And so I was like, this is like a really like good like way of living, and realize, and it was other things too. It's like I'm working with my hands and my body and moving around a lot, and so I'm not like sitting behind a desk all the time, so I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
pretty good physically. And it was just, yeah, it was like, seems like things are kind of working well together. So and then and as I was kind of going through that, I was thinking back to so the training that I'd gotten for like some of the ministry training and some of the stuff like that, and realized like, oh, that this work aspect is really like a key component that was missing. Because even if because the skills, you didn't, well, yeah, essentially, they weren't really great at training people to like be like a pastor. They maybe were good at training people to be like a good church member. But it's like if you're going to take 2 or maybe 3 years of your college time like to do that instead, like that's a pretty big like waste if
Yeah,
if you're going to still have to go and get a 4-year degree afterwards. Like maybe for 1 year if you want to do a gap year program,
sure.
it's a good experience. Like I got to go to missions trips and stuff like that, so it's like, yeah, you could justify it for a year, but it's like it's not really doing the whole the thing that it's supposed to do. And realize
Hmm.
like, well, if I had learned a skill that um paid the bills, then that would be a lot more beneficial. And even seeing that, like the way that my dad had pastored his church, it was a small church. There's a lot of small churches. Most pastors, I think, either they're the only employee of a church if they can do it full time, which means then that they have to handle everything that the church needs, or they have to work some other kind of job on the side to kind of
Hmm.
support things, or both. And so it's like, yeah, if you're going to be involved in ministry, like having some skill to be able to save money by doing things yourself for the church or for whatever, like that's really valuable. Because otherwise it's like if you're just paying somebody and you have no clue about stuff, it's like you don't know if you're getting ripped off
Of
or
course.
whatever. And so the idea just kind of came together to integrate those things as like really what I was thinking of it was more so like training a program that would really train young men to be like the future leaders just of the church or of culture. And also thinking of my 3 daughters and who the heck are they going to marry. So like I want there to be some sort of structure in place that gives the opportunity to produce good upstanding men of character. And if I get to have a little bit more like influence and oversight into what's going on, that all the better. Because
Well, character
uh
and competency, right? I mean,
yeah.
competency is a big part of it. you know.
Yeah. So that was kind of the thing. And then so I just kind of thought, kind of started like writing about it and thinking about the plan and the whole deal there. And a lot of the ideas were, if you figure out how to do something pretty well, and you're I guess this is one of the things that's really good about like a skill like in construction, or there's a creative aspect of it, and like the problem solving. You have to figure it out for yourself, in like a really internalized way. It's you can't just like follow the steps. Like
Hmm.
you're gonna screw it up the first time, or like the first several times. Like there's real skills that you have to learn. Like you have to, it's kind of like tennis or anything like that. You have to train your hands how to do it. You got to figure out how to like
Oh yeah.
the feel aspect of it, I guess you could say. And so it's like, okay, well, anybody that's learned a skill like that has a big advantage when it comes to whatever the next skill they're going to learn. So there's like an element where you can translate that. And so that was even the thing to think of, like, okay, well, yeah, maybe teach guys a basic set of skills, something that would be useful to anybody that's going to own a home. And maybe they don't want to go work in construction for the rest of their life, but that will give them like a skill set of how they learn, that they can translate into whatever their next endeavor is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was talking to, I had a second conversation with Annie and Jordan maybe it was last week, and they were, talking about childhood education. They use this, the idea of that there's a grammar to everything, right? Like
Mhm.
there is a meta grammar, that is, uh, I mean, you can obviously stack this all the way up to the logos, right? But it's like the grammar of any particular domain, with respect to skill building, is, yeah, like you're saying, going to transfer then to the capacity to learn the grammar of a different domain, or it should.
Yeah.
You can definitely learn a skill in a way that you can even become decently competent, I think, at some things without necessarily understanding like underlying grammar. But you will never become like anything approaching true mastery without like actually having a deep, maybe not even like rational understanding, but like a deep embodied understanding of like the grammar that goes underneath
Yeah.
that skill or domain.
Yeah. And then I was thinking about that too, like, so, and there's an aspect of like, yeah, recognizing that there is that grammar, I guess you could say, and consciously trying to be aware of that, I think was a really important thing. Because once I started thinking about this idea, then I wasn't just thinking about like, how do I get better at my cabinet job or something like that. I was thinking about like the, I don't know, I guess the principles that kind of uphold the thing, and those are the more translatable to other areas. But because I was thinking about it, because I was thinking about like, oh, I want to set up a program, like it's actually that thing of like setting up a program or something, or to not just uh, getting into the mindset of like, I don't want to say just like analyzing, but like reflecting on what you're doing. So I kind of started thinking about like, oh yeah, so part of the good thing is to do this, but also to like take that step back and think about like why you're doing it. Because like a lot of guys that do this stuff, it's like it's just a job, um, and that's fine. Um, but I think that anytime you kind of like learn about that depth, like, oh, like what Karen Wong says about, all those different things, like there's no bottom to
Yes,
to whatever
exactly.
thing you're in. So there's no bottom to any skill you start learning, or any thing you start to discover. And so like recognizing that fact and then like getting into the habit of exploring that, it really makes you enjoy it so much more.
Oh, absolutely.
And so really, which is really great, because it's like, hey, then um you can have great enjoyment from something that maybe other people don't think is as dignified, or maybe it doesn't convey as much status as other jobs or whatever. But who cares if you if you are enjoying it, and if it's providing your needs, and so it's a kind of like, um that's definitely one of those things where it's like, okay, anything you can do for yourself, you don't have to pay somebody else for. So that's a way you're saving money. So you're adding value, even if you're not like increasing your bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of can be orienting that time towards your family and to other things. And it was basically like, okay, like there's actually really good alternatives to maybe just the kind of cookie cutter career path that most people put in front of like all high school students. And this is one of those that's less talked about, or and not even really. Like I think there is I know there's a lot of people that know that there's a need for it, and there is like a lot of interest in working in the trades and things like that. But I think that there's actually, um I don't know if it's always the easiest path for people to go on. Like, and especially like it's one of those things where I've heard of so many people say like, I should have gone to trade school or something. If I had known, I should have done that. And it's like, yeah, but when you were 18, it didn't sound like a
Didn't
good
appeal
idea
to
to
you at
you.
18,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a whole problem there in the way that it's kind of being pitched. And so I think in that way, it's not, you can't just say like, oh, look, well, yeah, if you look at the numbers, and it's like, you could start off making more, and over time, like, you make more money, even like, or it can't kind of cancels out the student loan problem, that like if you're earning less at a certain point, but it all kind of evens out. So like, there's people that like look at that math, but it's like, well, that doesn't make anybody want to do it. But I think that if you present it as like, this is a a predictable path towards the things that people really want, which is like marriage and family and a home of their own, and and a community and all those things, then it's makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm thinking while you're talking, and I'm going to try to recapitulate kind of what you just said in a little bit. So what you're saying to me feels like maybe the appropriate pitch to a kid based on what you just said would be pursuing a career in the trades and building these skills is a more reliable way to to cohesion and the fullness of the human experience in the terms of the interrelatedness of things. So you've got marriage and family, right? And that requires a certain economic realities. So you got boom, 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 three, but you've also got this piece that you just spoke eloquently about, which is like finding joy in your work that's tied really sometimes subtly into mastery. And I think, this is coming from somebody who has never done, I hate this term, quote unquote knowledge work, but like desk work, normal corporate America kind of work. So take it with a grain of salt because I've never been that guy, but most of the people in my life are. And much of that work strikes me as being incredibly ambiguous and incredibly difficult to ever even, you ask people what they do. A lot of people can't even really in intelligible commonplace English explain to you exactly what skills it is that they employ to do their job, or like what the boundaries of their job necessarily are. They might reference like a certain software that they use, and so maybe there's like skill in employing certain softwares or things for knowledge workers or producing certain products, but that's always and necessarily disembodied. And it's something that is sort of like ever changing and ever shifting because of the changing nature of, like, you talk about the advent of AI and just how corporate America like is continually changing, such that I dare say it's not impossible, but it's very difficult in the average sort of corporate American knowledge work career to feel or to achieve the full sense of mastery, in the way that you and I like discussed it last time we talked, and on your channel, and what you're describing of your process of learning these skills from your dad, but then working for the church and hands-on, like trial and error, and putting the reps in, like I did with tennis, like putting the reps in over and over and over to the point where you not only understand how to do a particular action with building cabinets or furniture or whatever it is, but you like understand the grammar of what it means to work with wood or to work with your hands using certain tools. Like it you achieve a mastery that gives you joy, that is not just joy from doing each of the rote actions, but from the totality of like that experience and being able to relate it to the rest of your life. So like you've got all these, I guess that's what I mean by cohesion, is all these things fit together. And the lie, I suppose, that a lot of people believe is that money and the economic factor is, because it's so key, and this is why it's so easy to believe, because it's so it is so key to being able to support marriage and a family, like the things that we all really do want. There's the lie that you should take whatever career provides the most money, because once you get the money and that provides a potential for family and marriage, then that's all there is. And it leaves out this really, really important piece, which is joy in what you're doing. Even if like the words passion and, all those things can be really, really fuzzy. But I think like mastery and joy are things that people can actually understand, especially anybody that's actually ever been really good at something, whether it was sports or even academics, various things, can understand.
Games.
They can understand, video game, absolutely. People can understand joy and mastery, and to say like, hey, maybe I'm not making buku bucks, but I make enough money to support a family, and my marriage, and I can spend enough time with them, and I experience joy that comes from true mastery of what I'm doing. Like, man, forget status, forget those other things. If you have those, if you have cohesion between all those levels, then I think you can get to a place where you're, like I'm thinking of like Brother Lawrence, or just, Paul, telling us that we should be praying at all times, and Brother Lawrence being able to write about how he was washing dishes to the glory of God. It's like that's where these things all stack together, and you start to be like, yeah, my life kind of is a prayer. Like in all senses, when I'm building cabinets, I am supporting my family and I'm glorifying God through my mastery and the joy that comes from all these things lining up, rather than I'm doing this job, I'm not really sure why I'm doing it or who it's for, and I'm not really sure exactly if I'm even that, like I'm doing enough that my boss is happy, and as long as my manager's happy, then I'm getting paid this salary, and oh, but I can support my family with it. That's what knowledge work often sounds like,
Yeah.
and that's nothing compared to what you're describing in like building the mastery that you've built and that you want to help other people build.
Yeah. And I can speak to like so I've had a little bit of experience in some of those other workplaces and stuff, and even like in my company, because I work for a really big company, like even though it's in a local context here, but there is like a lot of I think instead of people feeling a sense of satisfaction, they have to justify themselves or whatever. Like there's a lot of like inefficiency, and then people kind of have to cover their butt for like make sure they look busy. Like looking busy is more important than getting stuff done, because sometimes there isn't always something to get done, or like to get some, you can't. It's like if you're gonna try to like take on some ambitious thing, well, you're gonna bump up into the guy on atop of you, and if it doesn't feel like being ambitious, and he just wants to be left alone, then you're gonna cause trouble for him, or it's not gonna work out well. And so and there's like that competitive aspect I think talked about a little bit in our last talk, like
For sure.
so much of like everything is so much interactions are like not about everybody's trying to like take advantage and not
Mm-hmm.
be taken advantage of, or like
Mm-hmm.
maximize how much you can get out of somebody else's effort while protecting yourself from being taken advantage of. So like and each time you add that little bit of stuff into every interaction, it just warps like the real value of things. Like things that people charge more than they should for crappy work because somebody's ignorant, and then um and then you have to factor in all this stuff of like people stealing stuff, and all these things that are our whole economy has has adjusted to factor for. It all just makes life a lot more like incomprehensible. And I think so I think in some sense, just even having the streamlined like part with the work figured out makes life so much less stressful, because like technically like our company works for the builders, and then the the people that live in the home or whatever, they are the builder's like client. But in reality, if like, because we do a lot of the warranty stuff, so I'll go in and somebody's like, hey, my cabinets are broken, and I fix them, and then they're like, thank you so much for fixing that, and they're happy, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like that's a good a good feeling. Or the builder too, when you get stuff done, and it means that then he can have the tile guys come and do their thing on time instead of having to wait, or it's like, and it's just you're reducing people's stress, and and there's still a lot of like inefficiency in that whole process, but it's like at least it's somewhat more close to the kind of like transparent kind of interactions that you should have. Like I know people like when talking about like church stuff and things like that, it's like transactional is like a dirty word, but it's actually a good thing when both people agree on what you're trying to get done.
Yeah, and the one of the powerful pieces too of what you do is that it relates to like not only the cohesion I was talking about between all those levels from your perspective, but also, or from like the wider perspective of your life, but also your skills transfer beyond just your work. I think that's quite significant too. Like you can do work in your own home or the home of a friend. Like there's this transferability and this holistic nature of being able to work with your hands, and uh, you could do work at your church. You could help a friend out at their house. You can also, literally take care of the environment and beautify the environment of your own home, um, in a way it's like the line between your work and the way that you employ those skills in other places is very fuzzy. And I think that's not, I mean, for instance, that's not true of my job. And I love teaching tennis and coaching tennis. And it's, I think I'm able to employ the mastery that I've gained in tennis in helping me to learn other things very quickly and understand things. And I can relate to people, especially when we talk about things like this, like building mastery and training and developing competency. Like I understand that very, very well. But the actual skills I have, it's like outside the tennis court there, like the skills I've built since stopping playing and starting coaching have been definitely transfer in terms of communication and being able to lead people and being able to understand other people and like their development and, psychological pitfalls and all these, like I understand a lot about people, and that has helped from coaching. And so that's the most transferable for me. But in terms of like the skills of my hands, like that's all between the lines of a tennis court. And I think there's just something very, very, very special about that transferability that is like not really true of other, like I said, there's communication skills and there's people skills, but you know, this base competency with being able to, I don't want to say manipulate, but like, or troubleshoot, but just like if something goes wrong, that's something physical, you have a capacity to like very quickly troubleshoot that, probably understand that. I'm not saying you can do anything and everything, but like from working with your hands, at least most of the people I know that do that seriously, they're pretty adept at quickly transferring whatever specific skill they have with their hands to like the wider sort of range of possible things. Like my father-in-law is just like, I mean, he's been a corporate guy, but he, like you, grew up, his dad taught him a ton of stuff he's just incredibly handy. Like that's why we have that word handy, is it's like kind of this weird, like nobody really knows how to describe this set of like meta skills that allow someone to just kind of like figure it out and fix things and uh it's like a general competency with your hands that transfers so well and is so necessary. And like I feel this huge lack in my life that I've tried to like slowly eat away at by learning things, but it definitely seems like I've felt a jealousy before of people who, like there's a contractor who lives on my street that is just like, I just drive by that guy. He just did a kitchen for one of our neighbors, and I just see him like every day the past month and a half he's been working, and he's doing cabinets, and he's doing like 5 or 6 different things. I'm like, gosh, he has such a wide array of skills, and his ability to use different tools, and then also to help the lady who he's working for craft a vision for her kitchen that's going to beautify her space and honors what she wants, but also his creative energy and vision for it, like coming into being through his hands. It's just yeah, it's very unique, and you see such clear, precursors to this, or just like examples of it in the Bible, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
with Paul and with Jesus and the disciples, like having worked with their hands, especially while they're traveling around. And yeah, it feels very human in a way that knowledge work doesn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, so one of the things, so eventually, because I kept thinking about this, so I ended up writing this giant book. Because, and I kind of thought of it like, okay, so it's like kind of like maybe you could say like the curriculum, or that was my idea, that so you can take like a year to go through it, if somebody like as somebody was doing all these other things. But I kind of kept realizing like, okay, like I knew there was this thing of like, if you're trying to present an idea or sell it to people, to keep it kind of streamlined. So just be like, okay, we're just like, so I would kind of say like, trade school kind of church thing, try to simplify the vision so people can kind of grasp it. And there's some usefulness to that, but really it's like, the bigger goal is kind of having to reverse the intense direction that we've gone with specialization.
Mm-hmm.
Because like even in the construction trades and stuff, there are people that are very specialized, and it's not some of them really well paid because it's like a very difficult thing to learn how to do, whatever that might be. But a lot of them not. It's like, just some guys just like, do the same roof shingles over and over and over again. Like it's just hard work, and they're really skilled at that one thing. It's not always transferable to other things, so and so that's the way that a lot of things are done now, because of like efficiency and keeping costs down and stuff like that. So it's like, it's kind of sad because it's not necessarily guaranteed that like anybody who goes and gets a job in construction will have the opportunity to gain a large
Sure.
Set of skills. But one of the things that I thought about that was really valuable was in connecting it to churches, because all churches have something that is very underappreciated, and that is that they have needs. And we don't think about that very often as like an asset. But if you have needs, those needs present opportunities. And so it's like any small church is going to have somebody, somebody who needs their lawn cleaned up, needs their house painted, has some problem with something that's broken. And if you have people that have needs, and they're not necessarily able to pay as much, or they might be in a position where they're susceptible to be taken advantage of, like elderly people. Well, that's a really great opportunity to have somebody who isn't, necessarily figured everything out, give them a chance to figure something out. Or,
Mm-hmm.
so my idea with that is just for any church, like if you have some guys that know how to do the stuff, and maybe they don't know, maybe they're not all professionals, but know how to do stuff. If you know how to do it like well enough that you would fix it in your own home, well, then you should feel comfortable doing it like for free in somebody else's home. Even if you don't feel comfortable like saying you're a professional and charging big bucks for it. And so it's like, those are the opportunities that allow people to learn that broader skill set. Because like that, I think is the thing that's really going to be the most needed. Well, it's the most useful thing in light of an unknown future, is
Yeah.
generalists, people that maybe you don't know exactly how to do every particular thing, but enough of a few things that you can make the connection and figure it out. And I think that was like one of the things I really saw in studying the Bible, and in like Jesus's parables, because that came through a lot, was like, oh, he's saying all these parables about like farmers like planting seeds and growing trees and fishing and raising sheep and building houses and all these things like that. And I was like, okay. And it says he was a carpenter, so we know Jesus knows some of that one in particular, at least. But it's like he has to have enough of a general sense of these things that he gets his analogy right. Even though it's like, we can say, well, the main point is trying to teach us a spiritual lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's got all this spiritual lesson that he's trying to teach, and the farmer's like, this guy doesn't know the first thing about planting crops, then he's out. He's not going to pay
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
And so it's like, Okay, well, yeah. So his parables, they have to work on all the levels, and so and this was even another aspect of what I thought was important about this was that we talk so much about the spiritual stuff, like in church, and we'll preach these parables all the time, but those parables hit very differently to somebody who knows sheep and who
Totally.
knows seeds and fish and things like that. And so, like,
Well, I mean, you know that because, and you see that because pastors, and we're talking the Protestant tradition where there's, typically longer sermons and many illustrations that are used, like, uh, even in preaching a parable that is already like an illustration that Jesus is using, they
yeah,
will then employ their own illustrations to, like, as another mediator to make it more intelligible to people,
yeah, yeah,
because they're like, oh, this is probably not super intelligible to the average like American in the 21st century. So let me just give
yeah,
some example from my life that's not as rich as the example
yeah,
that Jesus gave.
hmm
But it's necessary. Like, it's also, they're
yeah,
making the right move, and it's not always done very well, and it's typically oversimplified. But it's like, yeah, it's actually fair, because what is the modern accountant, you know, uh, how can they understand or relate to like the example Jesus is giving?
yeah. And so and I think at a certain point it was like probably that's fine, and it was probably pretty easy to make those translations kind of as things like uh, progressed like technologically or whatever, like making the leap from whatever, like I don't know, um, uh, trying to think of something, but like what when people used to do some stuff with their hands, even if they're using like modern tools to do it, it's like, oh, it's not the same, but it's like the principles kind of still apply. But now it's like if the only things people do with their hands is like interact with phones and computers,
Yeah.
then it's like I don't know. There's not like a parable about like carpal tunnel or something. Like I don't like what is the like what's the lesson you can learn that touches on that like physical aspect. So in
Yep.
some sense, it's like people need to go and figure out those. I'm a real literal guy, so like when we moved to Texas and I saw like at Home Depot that you can like they have fig trees for sale. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to buy a fig tree. So I got a fig tree and I planted it in my backyard, and uh, it's not doing as good this year because it's been pretty dry, but it's been growing every year, and so it's like I'm like I'm like excited to learn about what's unique about a fig tree because that's so
Such a,
prevalent
yeah.
in scripture. But whatever I learned about a fig tree, I could probably also learn about like trees in general, and I could get a similar thing. And then if I move somewhere else and, you know, um, like they don't have fig trees, but they have something, because it's colder or whatever, then, like apple trees or something. It's like you can learn, you can turn the parable around and figure out maybe there is something unique about a fig tree that you have to know to make like what's the distinction so that you can change the parable to speak about an apple tree and it still works. So
Yes.
maybe there's some little things you need to change along the way. So it's like, um but at least we can get back to like that general sense. But if we don't have the general sense, then it's really hard. So you got to start somewhere with
Oh yeah.
some real life stuff.
Yeah, it's the generalist versus over specification, sort of like that is such a, like, people being in silos. I know it's typically now called out how bad of an issue that is in science, for instance, but in academics more generally. But it's that
Yeah.
way in pretty much every sphere of modern life, of professional life. And um, we educate that way, and that's why you could say, well, chicken or egg. It's like, have people adapted to educate that way because the workforce became that increasingly over the last 150 years, or is it the other way around? It's a bit of both. But um like in talking to Annie and Jordan recently, like about this sort of education and proper pedagogy, and what it means to be truly educated. And I in this last conversation, it's like a big thing that I took from what Annie was saying, is that the beginning of like childhood education is so much about growing and transferring from yourself ultimately, but transferring a way of being, like teaching a child, like raising them up in a way of being that is like, you could almost call that like the ultimate generality, which is just like my orientation towards the world, towards God, towards the entirety of being, like how I am in the world. And then being able to, that is like a fragile seed, because like the child comes into the world with this capacity to be formed in that way, but there are so many potential pitfalls that can, like, you send them to kindergarten, and all of a sudden the teacher, what decides to do something, or teach in a certain way or communicate to the kid a certain way that just starts them down a track away from that certain way of being. And you could think of education a little bit as like, okay, I'm trying to carry this way of being and this orientation towards the world forward through the child's development, even as they come into contact with the increasing levels of complexity of the world. And it would seem like a true education, like let's say into the teenage years, would be one that still maintains a very significant orientation of generality, where you are taking that way of being and applying it maybe now to like quite a few different domains of like, I'm the kid is reading literature and starting to be introduced to philosophy and science and maths and these various areas, but also generality in the physical domains, which often in teenage years, like one way we silo kids is like, in sports all the time, people say, oh, well, you have to pick your sport by the time you're pick an age. People, insane parents now or coaches who are greedy will say, oh, if you don't specialize by age 8, no chance you're going to play in college or whatever it is, which is this weird goal that every parent these days seems to have for their kids to like play in college. And the result is that kids end up picking one sport by age 10 or 11 and foregoing the rest. And it actually hurts their athletic development and like triples the chance of burnout. Right. So then by 9th grade or 10th grade, they don't even want to play that sport anymore. And guess what? It's too late. They've been told it's too late to pick up any other sport. So now they're not even developing physical skills, athletic skills at all, versus this other approach that is like, maybe I actually do even pick one sport at age 12, but that's balanced in terms of my physical development with other skills like the kinds you're talking about. So maybe I'm doing woodworking and I'm doing this and a few different things along with a sport, or I'm playing 2 or 3 sports and learning to work with my hands in the ways that you're discussing. And it's this generality that then leads to, maybe in young adulthood or whatever it is, you do decide to specialize for your actual vocation, but you have a level of general understanding that allows you to both take maximal joy and have a great chance at true mastery in that particular specialized area. But if something goes wrong, you also have this real general competency and understanding of learning to fall back on, such that you can easily come back to the generality and enter into a different specialty without too much difficulty. Whereas now we're incredibly fragile. Like if something goes wrong, a lot of people have no other discernible skills to fall back on besides the super specialized thing that they have like been like very weird path towards some semblance of mastery of for 10 years. And it's like, if AI takes over, a doctor, let's say for whatever, AI takes over being a doctor, a lot of doctors are shit out of luck. Like all they know how to do is this very particular form of like medical practice. Like what else, what other value are those people able to provide in an economic sense, but also just in a sense that will fulfill them?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really helpful that I've learned about specifically with working with wood is that it's a very forgiving material. So like, because we have so much of a disposable culture, but you can fix something that's like made of wood like a million times. I mean, every time it breaks, you can basically glue it together again, and where it's glued, it's actually stronger than where it was before in that specific spot. If you do it right, if you repair it right, it won't break where you glued it. It might break somewhere else. So you could just keep gluing things back together again over and over, and eventually your like table or whatever is going to be stronger than it was at the beginning. Or you can also like repurpose things. Like, so I have like one table that I had built when my wife and I first got married. So I found this like really nice metal. It was wood and metal like table stand. It was on the side of the road, and it was kind of beat up. It was like from like a bar or something, but it was a nice piece, and I fixed it up and cleaned it up and made like a top for it. And it was like when it was just my wife and I, we just had this tiny little table, and it was like fine for us for where we could fit it in our kitchen to have like dinner. But then as our family got bigger, it's like, well, we can't really do that. It's not really useful for that. So then I took the top off, and then I turned it into a coffee table. And it's like the same top or whatever that I made, and now it's like serving another purpose, and yeah, it's funny because like because people say even like people are like, will AI or robots take over construction and stuff, and like I think if it does, the way that it's going to work is it's going to be like you're going to get like, if something breaks in your bathroom, they're going to like replace your bathroom with like a whole new bathroom. But that's like so wasteful if it's like because your toilet's clogged or something, like, so it's like if you can't like, and that's kind of the way that so there's something about that like flexibility of like, I don't know, things can be redeemed, I guess you could say, or like it's a very gospel-y kind of a thing. And there's a lot of stuff that goes that way with making things. And I think it's really the same too with like relationships, and I think even in parenting. So at some point in the future here, soon, I did a conversation with my dad on PVK's channel, and one of the really great things about my relationship with my dad is that he was very like, he didn't do everything perfect, but he was always willing to own his mistakes and confess them and like repent of it whenever he messed up. So he was really consistent in that. And so that's like what I learned is like, oh, well, that's what it means, like to be consistent, like as a parent, as a Christian, because like I think that's the thing, because we're all really concerned about like what happens when the thing goes wrong with our kid when we mess them up. And it's like, well, it's going to happen because everybody messes up with their kids somehow. You can't anticipate everything. You can't protect them from everything. If you try to make the like perfect solution, there's going to be some unforeseen thing that's going to wreck it. And like, and in many cases, the more, I think this is kind of the problem with the whole like specialization way, where it's like when we make these systems and these structures so like idealized, they are so much more fragile. Like, it's like you have a super finely engineered machine, and it's like the tiny grain of sand is going to ruin it, like, so it's but if you have it instead where it's not made to be perfect, but it's to be something where there's that aspect of grace and learning from mistakes goes into it. And that's really such a big part of like how we learn anyway. Like, you can't learn without mistakes, and like the mistakes are the cost that you pay for the knowledge and the wisdom. Like, so, but you can choose like how you're going to approach those mistakes, or you can try to guide the process. And especially, I think that's like really a part of a father's job, because the moms are always, to always be there to provide nurture, but the dad has to make sure that the kid gets a little bit of toughness. And so, it's like, well, you can either let them like skin their knee when they're little and they, are learning to ride a bike or whatever, or if you don't let them do that, then the first time that they something goes wrong, they're gonna, have a meltdown or whatever. Like, and I feel like that's the thing that
Totally.
we're totally at.
Yeah, and like I experience this all the time coaching tennis. So the only way you achieve, like what you just said, the only way you achieve mastery in tennis is through like literally hundreds of thousands of mistakes, like hundreds of thousands. Like in every single practice, you're going to make probably 100 mistakes, and so more than hundreds of thousands. Over 10,000 hours, if you want to throw that number at it, of practice and matches and all these things. And oftentimes with beginners, they expect to make mistakes, and so there's not that big of a deal. But then like kids and people get to like this intermediate level of skill where they now, like, people hit this wall where all of a sudden often they get so bothered by mistakes that it really starts to get in the way, impede their development, because it psychologically becomes very, very difficult because they get frustrated, and then it's easy for that to become burnout if they're not resilient enough to deal with that. And I often think about, like, how do why is this kid not able to handle these mistakes and understand that, like, mistakes are necessary, and just like, okay, move on, next rep or whatever. And I think a lot of it is like, kids are often very specialized and then very protected, such that they don't do a wide enough array of things, that they are used to just making mistakes in a bunch of arenas. It's like, oh, I do school and I do these one or two sports. And in school, especially nowadays, most schools, like, I'm pretty much teachers don't like to fail kids. Not often a ton of mistakes are being made. And things are typically going okay in school. And then maybe I play a couple sports or whatever. But a lot of kids who I deal with that are decent tennis players, like, have specialized into tennis. And it's like, they don't have areas of their lives where they are confronted with that consistent mistakes, such that they can realize, well, it's going to happen in tennis. It happens in X, Y, or Z other area too. So I shouldn't jump the boat from tennis because it's going to be like that anywhere. But the kids who only play tennis, they get to this point where they're like, where there's no, if they're going to continue to build mastery, they're getting into more and more difficult territory, such that mistakes are going to happen even more often. And it's going to be harder because you now have a bit of an ego that you're actually kind of good. And these kids burn out so quickly because they're like, I don't want to play anymore. And it, I think for a while it confused me, but I started to realize, just like, these kids' love for tennis is very fragile because they don't have other areas to, like, lean back on, and also other areas where they're used to failing, such that failure in tennis feels like almost existential to them, and they'd rather just not deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, a big part of the reason why I've been thinking about this too is, it comes from my own, not with like my dad, but like, I feel like I didn't receive a lot of like mentorship and stuff that I could have used in a lot of my other pursuits, especially like, in the churches that I worked in and stuff. Like, that was kind of, as I look back, I'm like, that was really kind of unhealthy. That,
Yeah,
like, nobody was, like, I was working there, nobody was like really checking in on me. And kind of what I realized is, and I don't necessarily think anybody was trying to set it up this way. It's just kind of maybe part of how the churches and Christians just adapt to the ways that culture go. But, with a sort of performative aspect, or a focus on results, like, I did not receive very much encouragement, but I realized that if I performed with excellence, which is a good thing, then I would get praise. And so it's like, so it's like, okay, well, I'll work for the praise, but that is like not, but that does just basically reinforce that fragility, because it's like, then as soon as you don't do it, you don't get the praise, and then it's like, I don't know how to work the system anymore, or whatever, or depending on how bad the fallout for that is, like, I mean, that's, I think, like, as a parent and as a teacher, and like when I train guys that I work with and stuff like that, like that's something I want to be really keyed into, is like when they mess up and how they're feeling. And I want them to really know, like, hey, that's okay. We're
Totally.
all going to make mistakes. Like, that's a really important moment. Um, and like way more important than telling them they've done a good job when they do a good job. Like, because the
Mm-hmm.
good job, it's like, yeah, that's fine. We expect the good job or whatever. Sometimes, people get like too, not everything should be obsessed over, not all things are equal, but, um, but yeah, like, uh, so I, my idea a lot with this is try to reorient things towards that thing of encouragement, which is really, kind of, to see the potential in somebody before they have proven it or whatever. And I feel like that's probably, something that's really really lacking. But if you're encouraging, encouragement, because you're looking at potential, that's the thing that recognizes, like, yeah, you could do a lot of different things. You don't have to just pick one thing and live or die by your success at that. Like, it's really, kind of levels things out. And I think that, uh, probably so many people are capable of a lot more if they receive that encouragement. Um,
Definitely. And if there's an expectation, right? I think like that's a big sort of reason for all this. I don't know. I've been racking my brain for the last hour trying to remember who said this quote I read on Substack the other day that was essentially like a list of things. Was it Napoleon? I can't remember. It was like a list of things that every man should be able to do. Like not like a specific list. He was using it as just like he was listing things like every man should be able to um like plan an invasion and fix a roof and like just like essentially
yeah,
trying to show the full range of human potential, because like that's the fullness of manhood, and it's like most people would read that and be like, oh, that's ridiculous in a modern person. But the idea of a Renaissance man, like the people like that existed. I mean, C.S. Lewis is a great example of someone. I don't know what his physical capacity was, but at least from an intellectual standpoint, you have guys like Lewis and Tolkien, who, of course, these are exemplars. Like they stick out, but it, at least among like the upper strata of like intelligence in society, there were far more men that were closer to their wide range of understanding, than people who were incredibly specialized. And like Lewis being able to read Latin and Greek and these things, and an expert in medieval knowledge, but also like a philosopher and also writing fantasy and all these different things. It's like those are, and teaching, and and you look at like real exemplars like Da Vinci, who was just unbelievable. Like what's the biographer's name? There's an incredible biography of Da Vinci that's worth reading, because from the very beginning, like the guy stresses like the number one thing you need to know about Leonardo da Vinci is that he was a supreme generalist. And we
mhm,
think of him as like, oh my gosh, this amazing painter, but he also did like 50 other things, like
yeah,
world class level. And it's like, yeah, that's actually possible. Like you don't just have to be like middle tier at one thing. You can be really good at a lot of things, and getting good at a couple of things will probably reveal to you that you could get really really good at a bunch of things if you actually had that orientation and that desire. But much of it is, to go back to my original point, is like the there is no expectation of that at all, because most jobs and most like, again, people think it from a financial perspective and from the ability to support a family. It's like, hey, to do that you just need to be good at one thing enough to get paid X amount and you'll be good. There is no expectation outside of maybe the highest rigor private classical schools or whatever, that you actually come into adulthood being able to both write a poem and build a piece of furniture and hit a tennis ball really well and you know analyze a piece of literature. Like that's like no
yeah,
no way, nobody knows how to do that, and there's no expectation. Whereas 100 years ago, at least in a certain strata of society, that was very much the expectation, that you would be able to do a wide array of things very, very well.
Yeah, but I think so much of that comes down to the fact that you're not allowed to mess up like anything once you like start it from now, like and I think that was the whole thing, like what Karen talked about, that thing of like the two groups of people, like the people that spend their time all semester trying to make the best one pot, um, versus the people who try to make as many pots as they can, and the people who make as many pots as they can end up learning how to make much better pots than the people that just do one, because it's so much like rides on that one thing, and it's like how do you're paralyzed by like indecision, and the consequences of failure are so overwhelming, and all this stuff, and all these things, like, I mean, I think that's like one of the great things about Lewis and Tolkien and all of them is that it was born out of their fun and enjoyment, and like, in the fact that they were like friends, them and the other guys they were hanging with, like that's what made them so productive, even, and gave them like, yeah, it was like, because as I said, like Tolkien would never have published Lord of the Rings if Lewis hadn't encouraged him to do it. Like, and like that's encouraging, like, and that's the thing, that you have to have that thing of like, you can't judge it yourself, but if you have friends or people that know you and look at you, and they can say, no, there is some value there, that gives you like such a boost. Like, I mean, I I I am always like, I hate having to like give people quotes for prices and stuff. Like, so I try not to do like a lot of like custom stuff. Like, it was like one of my friends really wanted to be generous. And so like he just was like, I want you to make me a bench. And I'm like, okay, great. And then like I'm trying to figure it out. I'm like, and like tell my wife, I'm like, you figure out what the price was he wants or whatever. And then she's like, well, this is what it costs. Just give a tip for whatever else you want. Anything above is a tip. And so it's like, because you ended up giving me like $1,000 for a bench that was more than I definitely more than I felt comfortable charging. And I'm like, well, that's really great. But it's like, yeah, you don't have people that give that kind of like encouragement, and that's why he was doing it, because he wanted to encourage me to do stuff. So it's like, yeah, and that's such a powerful thing. And
but and like to your point earlier, like it you take some of its power away by just throwing it around willy-nilly too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's targeted encouragement that is like super powerful and timely, and you actually have to know, you both have to know the people or the person, but you also have to know and have mastery over like the domain to sort of know like this is the right time and the right way in which to provide encouragement, or to withhold it.
Yeah. I probably should go in about 10 minutes. So
yeah, I honestly, we could probably just wrap up here, because I actually
okay.
probably have to get going and get ready to go to work. So this has been fun. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah. So I, just still trying to figure out all this stuff, and I wrote a big book. So, and I can do this.
I almost got one of them at Midwestuary.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect.
So yeah, if it's I don't know if it's like focus.
Is it gonna focus? There you go. Boom, got it.
So then you can pause it and you can download the PDF, and then I'm trying to work on like a much more reasonable sized one, and I'll try to focus on selling that one. But even with the book, part of my idea was like, I'm just gonna put this out here like unedited, like mostly, draft, because I'm like,
See what people think.
Yeah, and because it's like, to me, like that's one of the most valuable things, is like that you can show people like your rough work or whatever, show them that like things are a work in progress. I think that's really one of the things that I really liked about like Paul Vanderklay, what he was doing with his channel, like the fact that I'm like, he never edits anything, and it's just like,
it's the best. It's because that's what makes him trustworthy, and like what makes him
and that was the thing. And seeing him do that was like, well, I could do this.
Yeah,
That was the thing that gave me the encouragement
totally.
to realize I could do it myself. Because so much of everything else is just you only see the perfect and the
Yeah.
best. Like that's the problem with the algorithm. But there's so much like interesting stuff in all the fringes and the rough stuff. And
Dude,
so
that's why I haven't like even remotely tried to. I barely even do intros. Like
yeah,
I'm just here to talk, which I think is classic of TLC. But it's like, yeah, rough around the edges is kind of how it goes around here.
yeah.
That's a good thing. That's absolutely a
Except for
good thing.
Seabacks.
Yeah, well, dude, Seabax
But
is his is great, but
yeah,
I think it's hilarious because I'm like, man, I don't know how to do any of those things. Like, I'm
yeah,
sure I could learn for sure, but and maybe the reason I lean so much into the rough around the edges is because that's my natural bent. I just like I'm not gonna take the time to make it look really good, but I do appreciate that he does. But there's a place for both.
yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I think it's valuable.
Yeah. I mean, like that's even like I like it's really fun like having little kids and seeing them like when they draw their drawings are terrible, but it's like amazing to see how they improve, and then you realize like and it's also like when they give it to you, like whenever my kids make something for me, it's like that's awesome that somebody would like do something just for me.
Totally.
Um, but like it's so cool, like you know, I wonder if we could see like more what Leonardo's age 3 drawings. I mean, they were still probably like phenomenal, but they must have been worse than what we have from like his adult life. So
Well,
like
and there
just
was some key moment where somebody encouraged him in his just to do whatever. Like, Leonardo, you saw that tree or whatever. You should totally just draw it, and then
yeah,
praised him for it, even though it probably looks stupid. I mean, it
yeah,
was still probably better than what I could do today as an adult, but
yeah,
it probably looked stupid.
yeah.
And somebody was like, "That's great, that's great."
Yeah, but it's like, man, I mean, and that's kind of one of the nice things about like, well, now that we have this internet age, and it's like it's easier to preserve a lot of this stuff or put it on there. I think that is something that, like, I mean, I don't think we're necessarily going to go back to the same level of like being well read in the books sense, but I think that we are going to gain like some kind of a new capacity with being able to see so many people talking and like I think we're on a kind of a new development of a new kind of skill that it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. So it's like I'm
Absolutely.
yeah, it's one of the things why I'm kind of like just mostly opposed to like doomerism is that like I don't know, I just think God creates so much like awesome stuff and all this stuff like he's not afraid of our mistakes. So we shouldn't be either. Um and if so long as we're trying to do this stuff because we love God and we love other people, like it's going to work out even if we don't do it perfectly.
Yeah, I tend to view a lot of things through the lens of opponent processing. Like, I think the Reformation was opponent processing with Catholicism that made Catholicism better. I think Catholicism and Orthodoxy are opponent processing for Protestantism, and I think that's true of a lot of things. With Doomerism, I think Paul Kingsnorth is providing a valuable balance to other areas that provide a valuable balance to him. I don't think it's all perfect, like, of course, but there's the opponent processing. I think is really, if you view things through that lens, at least for me, it helps me not to say this person's right, this person's wrong, but it's like there is truth found in a lot of areas, and we just put different emphases on it depending on our on our view and our perspective. And of course, I'm not saying there's equal amounts of truth everywhere, but the I find the opponent processing frame to be super helpful in that respect. Even like with what we talked about today, like with specialization and generalization and all these things. So
Yeah.
yeah. All right, Mike. It's been fun,
Cool.
dude.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. All right.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.